Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Welcome. I just want to welcome everyone that has joined us here today for our monthly National Comadres Healing Generations podcast, where we just come together to have a conversation amongst women and to just check in and to see how we're doing and to share, the experience and the wisdom and the knowledge of other women that we have the pleasure of interviewing. But we are so glad that you joined us, and we know that there's a lot of options out there, but you have chosen to sit with us and hear us, and so we're so glad that you have joined us, and guarantee that there's going to be something that you hear that's going to make a difference for you today. And maybe it's something you've been wondering about or even trying to get clarity for an answer. Well, you're at the right place, because this is a podcast all about healing, and our hope is to heal the next generations. My name is Debra Camarillo, and I'm coming to you from the Bay Area of San Francisco, and this is the lonely territory where I'm sitting at, but just so grateful to be here. And I'm joined with my co-host and the Maestra Susie Armijo. Comadre, how you doing today? How's it going down south over there?
Hola, comadre. Just feeling really good. It's a beautiful day today, but I have to be honest with you, and that's because, I don't like the time change that's approaching very quickly. Feeling that the difference in the weather, getting dark earlier, seeing the leaves begin to fall, all that comes with that fall solstice. I had a beautiful celebration last night with Maestro Dairy. We got to light that fire and just send out a lot of prayers for everyone and everything that's going on in the world today to hopefully get us through this season. And just, learning those lessons from the trees about letting go, and being okay with surrendering those things that are no longer serving me as we approach the season. A lot easier said than done, but I never stopped trying. But doing good, comadre. I can't complain. Feeling very blessed. Gracias.
Yes, the change is coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
We kind of go inwards. The sun sets earlier and Nana Luna gets out a little more earlier, but even in that, right? The change, the movement, it's so important because lessons in the dark are lessons that you cannot learn in the light. And so as we prepare, to go inward and reflection, contemplation, that's the season where we honor that, right? So where the bear goes into hibernate.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I'm excited, comadre. Of course, we have another guest today.
Yeah.
A beautiful, mujer, and the pleasure that we have had to know her for several years now. And she's joining us today. So let me turn it over to you to give her an introduction, and let's bring her on.
Absolutely. She is our comadre, Tania Alfaro, from El Salvador, born and raised in Northern Virginia, where the support of her family has been her grounding force in life. Since 2001, Tania has devoted her career to supporting at-risk and immigrant youth and families. She is a bilingual program manager and advocate with a sociology degree from George Mason University. She brings over 20 years of experience in trauma-informed care, youth development, and community-based work. In her current role with Montgomery County's Street Outreach Network, she leads efforts to provide culturally grounded, healing-centered services that foster safety, resilience, and belonging. Tania enjoys connecting with nature in her spare time through being outdoors with activities like hiking, kayaking, and walking, and values both her quality time with her loved ones, her familia, and the peaceful moments of solitude. Oh, I hear you there, comadre. Solitude. I just treasure that word, treasure that time just for us, that me time, that silence, coming back to the heart, coming back to our center, connecting to all those things in the universe. So beautiful. Looking forward to hearing your story, your medicina. So honored to have known you and walked with you for so many years. You continue to inspire me by your courage to never give up, to continue trying in every way that you can to be that inspiration for others and keeping that light going to help so many of us. The need is always so much greater than we have the capacity to serve, but every little thing that you do has always made such a big difference and impact in all the communities and the mujeres that you've worked with, from what I hear and what I know. So I'd like to pass the palabra to you to allow you to continue sharing a little bit about yourself, maybe your familia, your background, and maybe a little bit about the work that you're connected to at this time. So I will pass that to you, Miss Tania Alfaro.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with the two of you, Comadre Deb and Comadre Susie. I was very surprised, to be invited and excited at the same time as nervous, right? Because it's new, right? I'm so used to just kind of talking to people face to face and sharing whatever of myself I can share. But as of late, as you mentioned, just really enjoying my solitude, coming home and being able to just be on my own and heal. Yeah, heal. I think from so many years of what we considered normal lifestyle. So I was born in El Salvador, and I came here when I was about 4 years old. We came to Northern Virginia with my mother, and I have 3 sisters and 1 brother. One sister's older than me, than Carolina, and then I have 2 younger sisters, Kenny and Jessica, and then my brother, my one and only brother, David. And, there was a point where my parents were just not working out. So we ended up going back to El Salvador. And, at that point, realizing that we couldn't travel back legally, right? Documented. And my sisters ended up staying in El Salvador, my older sister, my younger sister. And so I grew up mostly with my brother, coming back when I was about, I don't even know how old, maybe 9 or 10, coming back here to the States and, kind of dealing with, again, the conflicts between my parents and kind of figuring out what to do, right? And honestly, I'm young. Like, we don't know what to do at that point. We're just kind of going with the flow. And, I would cry for my mom to come back home when she'd left. And finally, I was just like, no, she can't keep doing this, right? Mm-hmm. And so I ended up living with my dad when they separated when I was 14. And so it was just my brother and I and my dad, and we would visit my mom when we got a chance. But I always saw my mom as like this strong person, in my life. And I always admired her. I'm daddy's girl, but I'm definitely, look up to my mom and what she has had to endure from the conflicts in El Salvador and the Civil War to coming here and kind of having to figure it out on her own, and then I lived with my dad until I was 21. Where I was just like, I love my dad, but I couldn't live with him anymore. It was really hard because he was very strict, but it's not like I was like, I wanted to go party or any of that. It was just, he wasn't like the most supportive emotionally. He was supportive in like education, like you need to get that education. You need to get your high school degree. You need to get your college degree. You need to get a good career, a well-paid job, and never for him, but like for me, because they struggled. They came here and they had to do all those jobs that, people who aren't as educated had to do, like janitorial jobs, odd jobs, and endure like the mistreatment of people because they didn't know the language and they couldn't defend themselves, right? So it was a lot. And so again, the solitude piece helps me kind of like ground myself and kind of take all that in and obviously be appreciative of how fortunate I've been, and I consider myself privileged because I've always had a roof over my head. My dad, even though he like would drive hoopties, like little old cars, he always was able to move us from point A to point B. And so we had what we needed at all times. And my parents always made sure we were well taken care of. So, yeah, so really thinking about all that and appreciating life and appreciating, being an adult as hard as it can be, being able to kind of like finally get it together after so many years of thinking the trauma that I lived was normal and wasn't trauma at all. Like I just needed to suck it up and keep it moving.
How well we know that, Maestra.
Yes, I know that seems to be a theme, right?
Yeah.
So in your journey, you traveled back and forth to Salvador, but then you end up staying here. And so what helped you, or how did that then transpire? There's a definite connection between your experience and the work that you do. And so can you share a little bit about that and tying those two things kind of together here?
Yeah. So when I came back to the US, I was going to school in Washington, D.C. And I met this woman, Marta Urquia, who, became my mentor. And she created a space for young women of color in that area and really created a space where we could believe in ourselves as young women. And at some point I got bullied and, she just made me feel like I could do anything, accomplish anything. And then when I turned 18, she gave me my first job in her organization called Sister to Sister, Hermana Hermana. Then it's no longer something that exists anymore, but I worked there for 4.5 years. It was tough. It was a really small organization that I loved very much. And we were working with young women. They're young women of color in that area. And I met so many women that became my mentors and the people that I looked up to. And, these were, to me, they were like the smartest women in the world, that also had endured discrimination, been part of the Civil War, and decided to use that to empower other young people, other women. I think I was honestly surrounded by a lot of very strong women. And I didn't see anything outside of it, but I felt like I really needed one, the women around me, but also figure out how I could support the young women the way I had been supported, providing them with the safe space that I had been provided, with the opportunities that I had been provided, growing up and kind of learning about their stories. Because where I was coming from when I graduated from high school, it was a very diverse school. It was Black, white, Asian, everything. And I went to DC to do a program in one of the schools, and it was only Black and brown. And it was like a culture shock for me because I was like, where's everybody else? And they didn't know anybody else outside of the Black and brown, and it wasn't until about 4 years or so later when I was on my way out that there was, different color coming in. And it was amazing to me to see this. But I knew that like I could make a difference in somebody else's life, again, like the way these other women did. And I still think about them all the time and how, they guided me officially. It was never like, oh, you're my mentor. But they made a difference in my life. Like they created a sense of belonging, a sense of strength, a sense of, accomplishment to a certain extent.
What a gift. What a gift to have that support around you, to have those examples, to be inspired by their example. It really makes sense now that you're sharing all of this, why you're so good at what you do, and where you get that fuel and that fire and that passion to be able to continue, in spite of all the challenges and especially today with everything that we're facing coast to coast, the issues that we're facing, mainly at this time, and I'll say it from my own experience over here on the West Coast, immigration is big time right now. It's just so challenging and just creating so much uncertainty and unpredictableness and fear. I'm wondering, on the East Coast, I know you're on the front lines over there. Maybe you could share some of the issues that you're facing with the youth at this time, and then have you been able to connect those dots and foster that safety for them and help them to be resilient and feel that in spite of everything that's going on, they're not alone and they have someone that cares for them, that they have that support and they do belong, in this society.
Yeah, I mean, just like there, it's difficult. We have now, I worked with Street Outreach Network for many years, almost 10 years as a outreach worker. And, all those years I worked with young women. Towards around 2014, we started seeing a new wave of like unaccompanied minors. And I worked with a lot of the young women there that, one, were undocumented, and two, hadn't seen or met their parents because they were left back home at such a young age, as young as a baby for some of them, and coming here and kind of not knowing where that was going to go. And even like my own experience, right, as a immigrant here, if it weren't for a really, really close friend of mine who was back then working for a law firm, I would not have had my residency and I would not have had my U.S. citizenship. So, seeing that wave in 2014 and then now seeing it again in a different light, it's very heartbreaking. It creates like the creation of this fear that you may get deported, that you may have to go back to a home that you don't know, right? That you've never seen, or that is not it's never been part of your life. For these young people, it's a lot. It creates a lot of fear. We've been seeing a lot of violence. I can't say that it's connected, right? But definitely the fear, develops disconnect, a lot of disconnect. And, the kids, I think one of our team members actually saw he was going to pick up one of the youth to take him to an activity, and his father was getting picked up by ICE. And so they see the impact that this is happening, and so fast, right? Like so fast. And just, I think for the longest time, immigrants have been scared of police in general, so they don't report crimes either, right? And so that was one of the things that we dealt with back when I was doing community outreach, is families did not want to report their kids, as runaways because the police wouldn't treat them well. They would just tell them, oh, like they'll come back, or I don't know why you're worried. This is who they are. It was like a cycle. And then, so now it's like they just don't trust that police will do anything for them. Not only did they not do something to help them, but now they could even take them. Fortunately, Montgomery County is a sanctuary, but that doesn't prevent, deportation, right? And so, it becomes really hard for our staff to kind of think about that, as most of them, were born here or are U.S. citizens, or at least they're, permanent residents, and to see, like the chaos that this has created, the fear that has created. In fact, the public schools are saying that they're seeing less registrations by immigrant students than they had seen last year, right? So less than half have registered to go to school. And more of what they're seeing is, those that are coming with visas or, diplomats and whatnot. So even the schools aren't seeing these kids anymore because no one feels safe anywhere, not even in the schools. And it's really hard. So one of the teams that I manage is the school team, which goes into the schools and does outreach to the youth that are there. and make sure that they have a space, a safe space to kind of feel comfortable, feel welcome, at least for, an hour or so that we're there. Or just, we just go check in with them, make sure that they're okay. And then in the community, we go out and again, we check in on them and their families, make sure that they're okay. Because a lot of these families also don't want to leave their home or their immediate communities. So it's kind of hard to implement programs where they have to go too far, or if we're not picking them up, they're not even going to go. So that's some of the things that we're seeing, and obviously it's different every year, every decade, but either way it creates a fear, in everyone, and trauma at that.
I know it probably doesn't sound much when you say, well, at least for an hour. But I know personally, just, growing up and being in the high school setting and not having protection around me or somebody to look out for me, that hour is priceless. For me, back in the day, it was like the bell rang at 3 and I just ran as fast as I could to the library because that was the only place that I could feel safe, and just stayed in there and until everyone left the school campus and no one was around, and then I would run home because of the unpredictability of what could happen from school back to the home. So just that hour, I'm sure, to have an hour of peace and to feel safe, I'm sure is enough light for them to be able to not give up and keep going, knowing that they have you all to look forward to. God bless you for that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's to have that little peace of mind, right? We say little, it's huge peace of mind when
It is.
Everything is so unsafe. But I'm just wondering that, you're on the front lines. And I know in the past you also worked, especially with the unaccompanied youth, and surrounded by a lot of violence. There's violence. I remember those years back, 14, 15, there's a lot of gang involvement. It was very difficult time and a lot of political charge as well. And you were out there and your team's out there. You risk your lives. You see things that nobody should be seeing. You intervene in situations that are dangerous, but also that are tragic. And so you go out there and have this exposure on a daily basis. And thinking about that time, and I'm in my mind thinking of particular incidents that I'm privy to that happened in your area. And now fast forward to a time where it's almost mimicking the same thing, in the sense that violence is up, the tragedies all around. The only difference is the political charge, right? That the source of a lot of this tragedy is our own government and the targeting of our community, especially immigrants, because immigrants have been so unjustly targeted and labeled as disease, or they're contagious. We're all criminals. And I mean, the list goes on. And you have to contend with that on a daily basis. So I'm wondering if you could share, what do you do? How do you manage your own sanity, your own well-being, your own care? And what connections, I know you shared a little bit about the solitude, but how do you keep yourself grounded and allowing all that toxicity not to stay stuck in you, but to pass it through?
That's a great question. And I think we all ask ourselves that question. It's like,
Yes.
How do we ground ourselves? One of them is making sure that my team is good, right? Knowing that they have the training and the support that they need for me to feel at peace, knowing that they can do their work and they can find self-care as important as I do. The other thing is really intentionally taking time for myself, going out on walks. Like I've been, can't say on a health journey per se, but it's more like conscious about how I spend my time after work. I can't unfortunately save the world, but I can help how I do what I do. As mentioned earlier, I like to go for, nature walks. When I can, I like to go, on the water. My family, as also mentioned, has been key to me, my immediate family. So being able to visit them, because I live in Northern Virginia and they live in Kansas City. So just taking time to go visit them, spend some time with them, because for the longest time, it was my mom and I and my sister. After leaving my dad's home, it was the three of us and then my brother. But then he was able to kind of start his own family. But just for me, family is just like one of the biggest things. However, I can say I've also had to learn to figure that piece out, because for a long time I felt responsible for my family too, right? Responsible for their well-being. And so coming back to Northern Virginia without them was big for me. It was hard. Moving to Kansas City itself was hard because I have two nieces that lived in DC that I've seen grown up. And that was difficult because I wasn't going to be able to see them anymore. And I wasn't going to be able to be part of their almost daily lives, not daily, but almost daily lives. So coming back was great. And then I had, my other niece who I also saw from birth in Kansas City, and kind of seeing her struggle, and my sister kind of grow up and having to figure her life out, and, the conflicts that happen within familia. Just figuring all that out and realizing I'm not responsible for everybody. I can't do everything for everyone. And I need to take care of myself. I need to, figure out my life, because otherwise I can't help anybody either if I'm falling apart. Or as they say, if my cup is not full, right? Like I have to fill myself before anybody else. But they definitely help me a lot. When I process things, like to vent, when I talk to my mom every so often, like every other day or so, I'll sit down with her and we'll talk about whatever. And then I say, you know what, Mom, we're done gossiping. We'll talk some other day, and we'll connect another day, but just connecting with her, and knowing that she supports me in everything I do, the work that I do, even though I think a lot of the times my parents don't really know or understand what I do, despite of how many times I explain it to them, but they always tell me how proud they are of me and the work that I do, and obviously miss me, but they know I'm an adult and I need to be on my own at some point. So definitely, family, definitely nature, definitely knowing that other people are taken care of.
Thank you, Mia. Thank you for reminding us. It sounds so easy to say, but just disciplining ourselves to make sure that we are on our own calendar. It's a different story, but you've done it very well. It really, it shows that the beautiful mujeres that you've been blessed to have in your life and be those strong mujeres and examples for you are continuing to live through you by your example. The youth are always looking to us for answers, for solutions, for understanding, for that compassion, for them to be able to navigate everything that they're having to be challenged with all those obstacles. I'm just wondering, in all the years that you've been working, if there's any particular solutions that you have found that have been the most effective in helping all the youth that you've worked with, especially in these challenging times. I mean, life is always filled with cargas and regalos as well, but what are some of the solutions that you found, those hardcore ones that you can really count on that help these youth to hang on and be able to trust and most of all, not give up?
So I'm not in the front line as I used to be, right? So basically providing tools to the staff, the team that we work with, so that they can be equipped to support the young people in the communities, being able to let them know that we're here, if they need us out in the community with them, we're also here to be out there. And we've gotten some of our staff, saying, hey, I want you to come out, and help us here and support us there, and, be able to meet the young people that we work with. In fact, this past Saturday, we had a peace walk. And it was really nice to connect to some of the young people there and be able to see who our team works with, and the young women, just knowing that we're here for them, and hear about the stories of how effective the staff is with them, right? And the opportunities that they are given through the programs that we provide, or just because they take them out. That was the Peace Walk is a place of gathering. So they got to see other young people, individuals that they could relate to, or, that they may not have encountered otherwise, right? So just providing those spaces for the young people where they feel safe, wanted, and loved. I think like that's the biggest thing. It's just recognizing and acknowledging their presence. I think like that's really it, because a lot of the times we go to gatherings and the adults don't even care to say hi sometimes, but just by a good morning. And I know you guys do that great with like all the young people and all the adults, and, just like you're here, when Mario comes out and does the trainings with our teams, it's just like individually, hey, good morning. Thank you for being here. Just acknowledging that like their presence is important, so we try to kind of let our team know like these are some of the things, and allow them to give us feedback as well. Again, how can we better support you out on the field? Because as someone who has been out of the field, I know it's tough. It's tough because you get all kinds of youth from all counts of life, with all kinds of trauma and situations. Everyone's not the same. Everyone doesn't require the same attention. And so just being open to that, just being open to ideas, situations, what are the needs? What do we need to do to do something different?
Staying connected. Relationship.
Yes.
Thank you, mija.
And you've worked, and certainly there's a lot of youth from all different places that pass through where you're at and where you're working. And I'm just wondering if you could share a story of maybe a particular youth that you worked with that just stays with you. Like I know in my life and doing the work I have, there's stories that, that I can never forget, and that keep me passionate about the work that I do. And I'm wondering if there's one of those stories that you could share with us and our audience that kind of has that same effect, right? That you think about it and you're just blown away because, man, you never think they're going to make it, and somehow they make it, or like a possible situation and somehow a miracle. Because like one of those stories that kind of just keep you going, keep that fire lit within you.
I have a few. I have this one young lady who was from, I believe, like West Africa. And most of the girls that I worked with, again, like I said before, they were recently arrived. And so this was one young woman that I met. I honestly can't remember how I met her, but she was referred to us because her parents kept kicking her out of the home. And so I would have to go with her and kind of talk to the parents. Anyway, all that said, because most of the girls that I worked with were Latina, right? This one time, she checked me. And she was just like, I see that you help all these girls that are Latina more than you help me. You provide, them with more resources and attention. And I said, oh, I had not even thought about that, because I give them whatever they need at that moment, right? Or at least that's what I thought. But I had to really reflect on that and really think about that, and give my attention to where it was really needed. Because I had this other young woman who would always call me and say, I'm running away. And I was like, no, I'll be right there, right? And her parents would be like, she's saying she's running away again. And I would be there. And finally, I was like, you know what? I can't do this. You run away every day. Like, I can't be there every day for you because I'm neglecting these other girls that I'm also working with. And so at some point, this girl telling me that, I had to really think about where I put my attention and my resources to this one, that's taking a lot from me, right? And kind of trying to balance that out. So not too long ago, this young woman who checked me sent me a Facebook message and was telling me how grateful she was for what I did, which was, to me, was just like, it was anything that anybody else could do. I took her to a college. She checked it out. She registered. She says she finished school. She now has her own family. And she was like, if you hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here. I haven't heard from the other young lady, but I'm hoping that she's doing well. Like once in a while, I'll hear from some of the young women. But she did teach me that lesson, that sometimes I just really need to kind of figure out, not necessarily that she's not important, but where I need to put my resources into, or what other approach I need to find in order to better assist, because I was enabling her, by telling her, like, I'll be right there. Hold on, just wait for me. But I had to figure out another way to kind of get to her and say, no, this is not the way to do things, scaring her parents and kind of like almost manipulating us to like having to be there for her. Right. So those are two of the things that like really stick out for me in the need for balance in general when working with young people, and kind of knowing when to say no, when to step back, or when to pass this kid along for someone who can actually provide the support that they need. Because sometimes it's not me, like it doesn't have to be me. And I can't feel guilty about that, because they're probably better off with somebody else who has a different kind of teaching, a different kind of approach, and not feel like a failure because of it either. It's like, I want you to succeed. And if it's not me, I want someone who will help with that.
That's beautiful that you're able to see through that lens and not try to control the outcome, but, using your discernment for the betterment of the child and yourself as well. I think that's hard for a lot of us because we want to, us rescuers, talking about myself, we want to fix everything, or we want to take them home with us, one or the other. But you're right, it is enabling. So I'm glad you recognize that, you allow yourself to do what's needed for the highest good of everyone.
And no, I mean, it's really hard what you just said, right? You want to protect them, because that's the person you are. We're protectors, we're natural nurturers, right? And so we think about these girls and the environments that they're in, and we want to take them home. But it's like, do I have the capacity? And our work mostly works because we don't live with them, right? We develop a different kind of relationships than their parents do. Their parents are the enforcers, the authority. We're not. So we create a different kind of relationship. And, that's what we've always tried to explain to the parents, right? It's not about authority. It's about discipline. It's about structure, and that's what we bring to these young women and young men. It's like the structure of our program with a curriculum, right? The structure of the program that we put together, like the Peace Walk. We're going to go do XYZ. And it's set up that way. It's not like, oh, I'm just picking you up and we're just doing whatever you want kind of thing, And so I feel like that's, they want someone to make them valuable, valid, hear them out. Like they're not just another burden to somebody because, we have to pay a bill or we have to feed or we have to, it's like you are real, you are valued, your emotions are valid.
Yeah, that's one of those lifelong struggles, right? And like you said, when to say no. Like that no is like a bad word. I was say no. What? You said no, But going along with just with the care of ourselves, we have to have limits and boundaries. And I often, remind myself is that if we want something more than the person wants it, then really are we doing them any good?
Right.
If we do more work than they do, for their own good, are we not robbing them the opportunity to learn the lessons because we don't allow them to, right? Because we try to fix and have everything for them. So, yeah, that's a tremendous lesson. And I think we learn or work on that, for the rest of our lives in that way. But we all have to go through that, right? It's like there's sacrifice to anything. And if you want something, then you have to work for it. Yeah.
I think it also applies even within our own families, especially the parents. I know personally as my parents got older and having to take care of them too, there's a lot of tough love there. You want the best for them, and it's so heartbreaking to see them disintegrating before your eyes and seeing them in these weaker, situations. But still, it really hit home when you said about they want structure. I felt like that with my parents too. They want to know that you got it and that you're going to take care of it and you know what to do. And by me being more prepared that way, it helped them to relax and trust the process.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Tania, your life has taken you down this trip. You've been very active in that way, but you have a DNA within you. And your DNA goes back to that motherland of El Salvador, where there's such rich teachings and rich culture and medicinas and just tradiciones. And I'm just wondering, in your own life experience, how do you incorporate that in your daily life and also in your working life? Some of those traditions, and maybe if you could just share one of the traditions, that you feel is, gosh, that's so important to me, or, if it's a way of being, or what helps you stay connected to that which runs through your body and your veins?
That's a very good question. I think just really being able to connect to Mother Nature, because we come from Earth, right? And just appreciate life. Because I'm thinking about my grandmother and my great grandmother and what they had to do to survive, but what they did, period. I remember my great grandmother, this old, shrivelly little lady, waking up at early morning. I don't even know if she slept, right? I know at some point the lights were out, but she would get up and she would make her coffee, and we would, all the kids would get up and she would give us 10 cents to go buy pan dulce. And we would come back and we would drink the coffee with pan dulce and just create that, I guess, tradition or relationship and that feeling of being home, right? She created that for me. Even though I didn't grow up with her, I think just spending, she's just one of my favorite people. And then seeing my grandfather just kind of walk and do his job with walk the cows and, the carreta and just being a kid, just being a kid, and when I see my nieces, they have all kinds of responsibilities, right? To take care of their siblings. And I know I had to do that too. But when they're with me, I want them to be kids. Don't think about taking care of anybody. Don't worry about me. Because I had the other day, one of my nieces, you never buy anything for yourself. You're always buying stuff for me. I was because it makes me feel good. I don't want you to worry about anything. I want you to be a kid, and seeing them all interact with each other. It takes me back to those moments with my great grandmother. And even with my grandmother, right? That to me, it's just, I don't know, that just created a sense of home no matter where I am. I always think about café con leche and pan dulce, and like that brings me back, that takes me back, that like grounds me to a certain extent, you know. And it's not like a big thing, but it's what makes me appreciate life more. You know, y la música, like las rancheras that she would play at 4 a.m,
Yeah.
you know, it was just like, just the thought. And they didn't, you know, they don't live in like nice homes. It's like, you know, the dirt floors and like the shabby homes. And it was just beautiful. Like just being able to like appreciate the fact that you have something.
What a beautiful memory. I can feel that in my soul. I think that's going to be one of the solutions. Pan dulce, un café con leche. If all else fails, we still can count on that. Primero Dios.
Yeah. I was in Guatemala, and they had chocolate with something in it. I want to say it's ginger. My friend will say it's something else. But it's just like the feel of, you know, El Volcán, like so close to the mountains, and just, I mean, it almost feels like the ancestors are like right there with you. You know, it's like that's some of the things that it's simple things that made a big difference, that just like filled you, you know, like that's what I take from that.
Well, you know, it's really interesting because, you know, when I talked to my mom, and you just said it right here too, the children drank coffee. And then I don't know what happened, because then we come over here, right? And now you can't drink coffee till you get like an adult or something. It's like kind of treated like alcohol or something. I don't know. You gotta wait till you're 21 to drink coffee. No, but, you know, so it's really interesting, like traditionally though, you know, those things, because we grew the coffee, you know, or the cacao for the chocolate.
Yep.
And the warmth of it, right? The warmth of my dad was, you know, and my mother today, the hot chocolate, you know. But definitely everybody drank coffee. It was like a shared thing. And I remember, you know, years ago reading a report about coffee, that those, especially islands where they had a lot of coffee, depression wasn't so much. And I don't know if it's, you know, exactly why, you know, maybe it's the reminiscing of what that brings, that connection, or if it's the caffeine, I don't know. But also, you know, today, you know, is not like the coffee of the past either.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, because we just have a tendency to have to get our hands in there and mix all kinds of stuff in there. So
I actually have a friend who has a coffee farm in El Salvador. And
really,
one time I went to his house because he's like selling the coffee and, you know, chocolate and stuff like that. And I mean, he was so excited to explain the process, and it's like an art.
yes.
And he was just so like, he's a storyteller. So, you know, his story, the process, the science piece of it. And I was like, okay, I see why like this is so impactful, as simple as it seems. You know, a small business has to go through a different process than a big company who, you know, creates all this massive. But, you know, his like Jacobo little coffee farm, he was telling me like how much, you know, using La Piedra, using this, and how he had to create this machine to help him, you know, with how the coffee is and like which coffee seeds he had to use. And I was just so amazed. But I think I was more amazed at the passion that he told the story with. And I was like, wow. And I think that's what it is. And you're right. Like now it's just like, oh, it's just coffee, you know, because you can go to any corner store and get coffee. It's not the same love that our grandmothers and great grandmothers would put into like making those, you know, getting those coffee beans and like making the coffee and whatnot. So it is different. It is different. And I don't know that like our new generations are going to be able to see that and appreciate that, you know, because we have like these massive stores that kind of take away from, you know, the making of a product.
Yeah, and it's that passion, that love, Because there's a lot, that goes into that energy that is put in there. I know when my partner, Val makes me coffee. Oh my God, it's the best coffee in the world. But even when she cooks, because she has a passion and a love for that. So, it's like I can never match her cooking because I don't have that passion that she has for the cooking because I don't even know how to cook. But it's like there's a difference, right? But I also know when I'm doing the things that I'm passionate about and I give that to you, then you receive that as well.
Yes.
So, and the connection, right? Because it seems like a simple thing, coffee. But that coffee has a legacy that goes so far back, through our parents, our grandparents, great grandparents that we get connected to, even just by the smell sometimes, right? Waking up to a good smell of coffee. I know I can hear my mother's voice going, oh, that coffee smells so good. But gosh, time just always flies. It always flies when we're having these types of conversations. And so I'll turn it over to Maestra to ask the last question of our time today.
Oh, we could talk to you forever, Mija. But as we come to the end, it's Healing Generations. And, a lot of our platicas is to share our medicina, but also share our wisdom that we've gained from our own personal experiences or that has been taught to us. So I'd always like to present the question, like you talked about all those powerful mujeres in your life that have taught you so much and were those examples for you. Wondering if there's anything that you would like to offer for our next generations, but also, for our elders as well, because, the circle comes back around. It started as children and we come back to that child stage, but every quadrant, whatever quadrant we're in, we're always learning something. So what is it that you would like to offer as far as a consejo that you think would be helpful for the next generations that are coming up? A special teaching, maybe a dicho, maybe something that has helped you to draw upon, when you're facing your struggles, or that you think they should keep in mind, as we go forward and the way the world's changing and all these things that we need to adapt to, what you think could help them or what they maybe need to understand about us as elders as well.
So there's a motto that I live by, and it's like, you are where you're supposed to be, right? There's a reason why we're there. And obviously it doesn't really apply to everything, because why should I be in a terrible situation, right? Like when we're talking about like negative actions and negative events, and I never mean it that way, because no one should go through that kind of trauma. It's heartbreaking. But in situations where like, you meet someone who gives you something positive, or you land the right job or opportunity, or the mentor, at school, or the program, right? Like you are where you're supposed to be because you have a lot to give. And that person at that moment can give you that. I've heard there's seasons, reasons. I don't even know how that goes. But, some people are meant to be in your life for some time, not forever. And that's okay. Like being okay with that and letting go when it's time to let go. I was actually talking to my stepdaughter today, and, she tends to call me during her hardest time. And I told her, why do you wait? Why do you wait? And one of the things that like occurred to me is like, someone gave her an opportunity to kind of find something that she needed. And I said, sometimes we overstay our welcome because we want to believe that that's where we're supposed to be, and sometimes things happen so that we can move on to the next thing that's meant for us, right? And so sometimes we're just so stagnant because we don't think we deserve better. But we do. We all deserve better. And in this time since COVID, there's been a lot of like depression and loneliness, which kind of understanding alone doesn't mean lonely, and kind of figuring that out. But appreciate nature, the sun, go out, like enjoy nature, enjoy the trees, the greenery. You were talking about the changes in, our season, right? Like all of that just brings so much energy, so much of what we need. And sometimes we just don't see it because we're so stuck, and maybe that moment, like we were supposed to go outside and feel that energy from the sun, from the moon, from the trees, from the earth, the grass, whatever it is, like, or from a friend. Sometimes that friend calls you at the right time. I know I've called people and they're like, oh my God, like, it couldn't have been a better moment. Like I was going through this moment and, you just came and it's like, you knew, you're like that light for that person, or you can be that light for that person. So you never know. Like when you have that instinct, kind of follow it, obviously good instinct, right? It's hard to know which one is not, but sometimes we get these like urges to do something and we're just like, I'm just going to hang out here, and it could be like something good can happen. You could receive good energy, a gift, whatever that is, whether it's physical or, or not, just be open, like, open and open-minded to like the things. Cause I think for the longest time, I was very stubborn and strict, and it was like my way or the highway kind of thing. So lately I've been making it a point to be more intentional about listening to people. And even though I still kind of like talk too much sometimes, I'm like, okay, I have to think about certain things. I'm like, oh, that's right. You have a point, or that's a great idea, or let's try it that way, but I have to think about that. And I think like we all need to kind of look into that, to be open, because it could lead us to something better, something bigger, or just make us lighter.
Wow. Tania, I just want to thank you. Thank you for joining us today. If you have been with us and hearing this conversation, I know that it has uplifted your spirit. You're at the right place, and at the right place today is joining us here on this conversation and knowing that you are worth it. You are valuable, and that in life, there's gifts that are waiting for you. And so we just want to thank you today for joining us from whatever part of the world that you're hearing us from, and for continuing to support this podcast. I know we're very humbled and grateful for this opportunity to be able to share with other women and to hear women's voices. And so we want to thank you for being faithful listeners and helping us to continue this podcast. But as my mother says, all good things have to come to an end. So our time is up, and we just want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And comadre, I tell you.
So grateful. Thank you for your medicina, your wisdom, your consejos, just for being who you are, Yep. And definitely you were where you're supposed to be today with us. Adelante, mija. God bless you. Always here for you.
Yes. No, thank you so much for allowing me to be here, for inviting me. I really appreciate both of you, because anytime I'm around you, I feel lighter. Like your medicina is empowering. So thank you so much.
Well, with that, we want to say bendiciones and thank you again for joining us for our monthly podcast of Healing Generations, sponsored by the National Comadres Network. Bendiciones.
Bendiciones. Adelante.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.